This subject is really very important for humankind, for consciousness evolution. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Thank you to Reaprendentia, this international branch that organizes the diffusion, dissemination of the ideas of conscientiology and the research in conscientiology everywhere around the world. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Well, and today we have this task to talk about cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness is the same as cosmic consciousness. Worldwide, the term cosmic consciousness is well known. In conscientiology, Professor Valdo Vieira, he created the neologism cosmic consciousness. It is the same. It has the same meaning. And it is a very important phenomenon in personal evolution, for the evolution of consciousness. So I prepared today just a few words, a few topics that I used to present in a course. In this course, where I work together with my colleague Rodrigo Marchioli, we present this course here in Brazil, and we intend to present it also in other countries. So I will try to talk to you about a few topics that we used to present in our course. Okay, I selected a few subjects. So I may talk to you a few introductory words and then definitions about cosmic consciousness. I may talk to you about some information about my personal experience, the history and references on the subject, and then two topics concerning theoretical and practical approaches. The first one is the scale of expansions of consciousness, and then hypotheses about expansions of consciousness. To introduce this subject, as I said in the beginning, cosmic consciousness is the same. It's a synonym to cosmic consciousness. And there is another expression, expansion of consciousness, that can be used also to understand the nature of this phenomenon. When we talk about expansion of consciousness, we are trying to understand the process that leads to cosmic consciousness. And this process, it may be experienced through intermediate or gradual phenomena. So we admit that it's possible to an individual to develop the skill to access the cosmic consciousness through gradual expansions of consciousness. And there is a very important consequence of all that. That is the cosmic sense. That means when you may acquire, when you may develop a new way of life, perceiving other consciousness, finding a more evolved sense in your personal life, understanding evolution, understanding a higher level in terms of ethics. We call it cosmoethics. Putting all those subjects together, we call this way of life the cosmic sense. So these are the subjects that we may talk about today, okay? But we have a few key topics that may help us understand the way towards cosmic consciousness. The first is the fundamentals of self-parapsychism and projectability. So self-parapsychism is the ability to perceive extra-physical dimensions and to communicate with other consciousness, even those consciousness who live no more in the intraphysical dimension. The people that is deceased, we call them the extraphysical consciousness, the conscience. Conscience means extraphysical consciousness. So we can communicate with those consciousnesses. And projectability is the ability to develop experiences out of the human body, to live the human body through the phenomenon of out-of-body experience. We call it the projection of consciousness. So it's very important. If you want to understand cosmic consciousness, it's very important for you to develop those skills for many reasons. For instance, for you to understand what is and what is not cosmic consciousness. It's very common that people make confusion between sensations. For instance, the sensation of energy in high level. It's possible that someone can misunderstand this perception and have a mistake thinking that it could be the expansion of consciousness, but it's not. It's simply the sensation of energy, the expansion of energies. The expansion of consciousness is another thing. So it's very important to study parapsychism and projectability for you to create differentiations between the phenomena, but mainly for the researcher to find a way of personal development towards cosmic consciousness. We really admit that it is possible to anyone interested in this kind of development to achieve the goal of cosmic consciousness, developing the self-parapsychism, the abilities of perception, of extrasensorial perception. In the core of the phenomenon of cosmic consciousness is the paraperception skill, the ability to perceive everything. That is in the core of this phenomenon. So let me talk right now about the second topic here, the cosmoethics and interessentiality in the self-evolutionary perspective and in personal paraphenomenology. So we're talking about cosmoethics. It means that it is possible to you to develop a kind of ethics, and you may perceive in a very closer way what's really happening to other consciousnesses, to other people. If you can imagine a person, a consciousness, with a high level in terms of cosmoethics, very, very probably this person will perceive in a better way what is happening with other consciousness. The more you develop cosmoethics, the more you may perceive precisely what's going on with other consciousnesses. And in the same way, if you develop interassistentiality, so the deep interest to help the development, to help the evolution of other consciousnesses in many different ways, you may come closer to the reality of the evolutionary necessities of other consciousnesses. So when you put those fields together, cosmoethics and interassistentiality, you may approach reality. And this process is in the core of the cosmic sense, is in the core of the development of the expansion of consciousness. So the perception of the reality of other consciousnesses and to find a way to go deeper inside this reality. So, and the third topic, and the cosmic sense, this way of life. It is possible to apply the cosmic sense in philosophy, religion, politics, and science in a real way in our world. For instance, let me tell you, you may have heard about the human journeys in spaceships outside our planet. For instance, trying to reach the moon. And there was an astronaut. His name is Edgar Mitchell. And Edgar Mitchell, he was outside the planet Earth, looking to the space, into the Earth, and he had the experience of expansion of consciousness, probably a cosmic consciousness. And after that, he decided to work to help the evolution of humankind. And he created an institution because after that experience, you see? So, as a consequence of an expansion of consciousness, a man may try to change his life and to create ideas, books, institutions, and to help evolution in our planet. And in history, we have many, many examples in this way. For instance, almost all religions, they were created after experiences of expansion of consciousness. And Buddha, Mahomet, and many other spiritual men dedicated to spiritual problems. And they had a kind of illumination. And they tried to make something to transform, to help humankind. And because of that, religions were created. But now, if we study the nature of this phenomenon and what's really happening in our planet Earth and in extra physical dimensions, we may discern that religion is no more necessary to be created. We may help evolution with discernment, clarifying the extra physical reality and clarifying and trying to clarify the evolutionary process. So religion is, we may consider an ancient kind of ideology to help people to find a better way of life, looking for ethics, trying to use many roles in life, looking for spiritual contact. But if we don't use research to renew our concepts, we may stop with dogmatic position, and we may stop even our evolutionary process. So we think that it's a better way to be always evolving through the renovation, renewing our ideas. And science, so far, may be a good way for us to look for a better evolution. But in philosophy and politics, it's also possible to apply the cosmic knowledge. Personally, I have found people, for instance, in the ambience of the United Nations, who had the experience of expansion of consciousness, and people who works in politics. And in general, this kind of people, they are developing good politics. You see, that is different from the conventional politics, when in general, politicians are criticized. But it's possible to find good people, men and women, who had the experience of expansion of consciousness and they are acting professionally to apply themselves to help other people. Okay? So when we find people like that, we may try to detect if this person is living using what we call cosmic sense. It's very interesting to observe other people and to try also to investigate if this person had any experience in terms of illumination, expansion of consciousness, and things like that. So let's see what conscientiology says about cosmic consciousness. In this slide, you may find a definition in the book Projectology. The author of this book is Professor Valdo Vieira. And let's read here this definition. So, cosmic consciousness is the inner condition or perception of the consciousness of the cosmos, life, and the order of the universe, the indescribable, intellectual, ethical exaltation when the consciousness feels the living presence of the universe and becomes one with it in a single, indivisible unit. So this definition, I consider it a very, very good definition because Professor Valdo could put together very important notions and conceptions. For instance, in the beginning, cosmic consciousness is the inner condition or perception of the consciousness of the cosmos. So here, Professor Valdo is calling our attention that cosmic consciousness is essentially a phenomenon of perception. Okay? This is in the core of this phenomenon. And perception of what? Of the consciousness of the cosmos. We may translate this expression, maybe, if we can perceive all the consciousnesses together in the cosmos. And we may ask if the cosmos has a consciousness, only one. We don't admit this possibility. We admit that the cosmos is made by a very great quantity of consciousness. We don't know how many. It is too much. We may consider bacteria, the viruses, all the living beings before the human being, and the living beings after the condition of the human being, and also the organisms that may live in other planets, and also the consciousness who live in other dimensions. So when we say the perception of the consciousness of the cosmos, it means everything together. It's really a very, very great perception. Also, the perception of life and the order of the universe. What means the order of the universe? Well, I don't know this answer, okay, but I can think about it. For instance, when I observe a child developing the sense to put objects in order, classifying objects, we can observe that the sense of order is inside the consciousness. So I have a philosophical reflection. If the order that we may perceive in the universe, if this order may be provided by highly evolved consciousnesses who can organize the universe itself. So this is a kind of speculation, because during an experience of expansion of consciousness, it is possible to feel and to perceive this kind of order in the universe. And I speculate if this order, it also represents the perception of high evolved consciousnesses who organizes the universe. So this is a speculation, but we're trying to apply logic in this kind of problem, okay? So, coming back to our definition.
Uh,
Yes, Anna, please.
Excuse me, Ulysses. We have a question from Munir Bazi. He's asking if you could give an example of cosmic consciousness in the field of philosophy.
Okay, Munir is a great friend. He's a philosopher and he's also a physician. He's a very good professor in conscientiology. So, we know a few philosophers who had the experience of expansion of consciousness. Maybe this kind of experience was not reported in the way we would like to hear. But for instance, I don't know if you heard about Schilling. Schilling in the 18th century. It seems that he knew about this possibility of expansion of consciousness. And he wrote about that, and he changed his way of life in this way. And other philosophers, in the recent history, for instance, Immanuel Kant, he's very known. For instance, Schopenhauer, Hans Driesch, and before them, Plotino, in the beginning of the times before the Christ age, Plotino wrote about the consciousness, about subjects very important in our world for humankind, for a person to understand his role in this life. So a philosopher, when he can have some kind of experience in terms of deep experience, he may try to translate this experience, trying to give other visions of our world, of our existence. If we go deeper in the subject, I remember the first writings in the Indian tradition. We call them the Vedas, the Upanishads. When wise men, they wrote about consciousness, about extra-physical experience, and even in those books, those philosophers, I may consider them also philosophers. They were men of spirituality, of philosophy. They tried to give us information about possibilities in life, for us to understand the reason, the meaning of life, not only thinking about the material life, but also about the spiritual life. And the way those people in general had this kind of contact with new information was through expansion of consciousness, and also the experience outside the body. And they could report those experiences. So this kind of possibility is very important to a philosopher. When a philosopher has the opportunity to have this experience, to expand his consciousness, and probably he will see the world in a different way. And different from people from religion, they try to use categories more related to reality, to expose their thoughts and their way of thinking about the world. That's it. If I can remember something more about the philosophers, I will try to say here. Okay? So
I
let's go
was
ahead.
really to kind of prepare myself for this presentation. And one thing that people have this phenomena when they have they experience um, uh, a projection. It's like a life-threatening projection when they have like an out-of-body experience when they are in extreme situations. You heard about that, or
Yes,
how that applies to?
yes. If I could understand your question, you are asking in which kind of situation people
About
may
near-death
experience
experiences.
the expansion of consciousness or the cosmic consciousness. Well, you may experience in the intraphysical dimension or in the extraphysical dimension. In general, outside of the human body, it's easier because you don't have the limitations of our brain, of our physical body. But you have also the challenge at first to stabilize your lucidity. So it's necessary to develop outside of your body at first a good level in terms of extra-physical skills for you to be in a stable condition outside of your body. After that, it's much easier to expand your consciousness. And the way to do that, Professor Valdo Vieira described it in a very good way in his book Projectology. You may choose one way in your sensory skills. For instance, maybe your vision, your thoughts, your energetic sensations. You may choose one of these ways, and you may apply your attention, your consciousness through this sensory way. Okay? You may try to expand your consciousness, choosing one sensory way. This is the basic extraphysical technique for the expansion of lucidity or for the expansion of consciousness. Professor Valdo describes this technique in his book. I may say that it's not difficult to develop this kind of skill. At first, you may try to develop it even in the intraphysical dimension, and it works very, very well. In the beginning, of course, a person, an individual, may not perceive clearly what's going on, but after a few experiences, when you apply attention to your consciousness attributes, you may discover that it is possible for you to expand the function of your personal attributes. Okay? But let me take this opportunity right now to try to make a differentiation between consciousness and what is not consciousness. This is very important. For instance, if you try to expand your consciousness, how do you know that it is really happening? Okay? This is not easy. At first, you may try to perceive what is not consciousness, what is not you. So, where is you in the whole experience? For instance, if you try to expand your energies and you feel your energies expanding, your energies, they are not your consciousness. Okay? For instance, if you expand your ideas, the ideas you have, they are not your consciousness. Your consciousness is something different. Your consciousness is the one who produces the ideas. Or your feelings your emotions, you may expand all those attributes. But those attributes, they are not your consciousness. You are the one who produces those effects. So, this is a very hard problem, really, to identify for you what is your consciousness in the core of everything. This problem was first assumed in humankind. In humankind, as you know, it was written in texts that we know by the name Upanishads. They were written to try to translate the spiritual values from the Vedas, the ancient scriptures from the Hindu tradition, from the Hinduism. And there was a man in that time, thousands of centuries ago. His name was Yanavalkya. And this man, he was very interested to find consciousness in the core of all the experiences. And he created a kind of algorithm to find that. It's a very simple idea that in general, in science, and also in philosophy, we use today. That's it. If you cannot explain what is it, so try to understand what is not it. So if you right now are not able to perceive your consciousness, try to detect what is not your consciousness and try to exclude that perception from your field. If you go ahead in this kind of movement, you may come closer to the phenomenon of consciousness in the core. And this method, Yanavalkya called it neti neti. In the Sanskrit language, neti neti means nor it, neither it. You see? In Portuguese, we say nem isso, nem aquilo. So you may try to find what is in the core of your experience. And this method is really very useful because when you have many different parapsychic experiences, you may try to discern what is and what is not consciousness in the core of all those experiences. So consciousness is very simple. You may just rely on the focus of your true sanity, of your sense of inner existing, and really to perceive what is you in the core of that. So through the experience of expansion of consciousness, this core of consciousness is what you may perceive in a greater and expanded way. So it's very hard to explain what is it. So the method that in general we use is saying what is not your consciousness for you to achieve, for you to reach the core of yourself in the expansion of consciousness. I may ask you excuses because I have so far any other better explanation. I don't know, Anna, if you want to say something or ask. I saw that you came to our screen. I don't know if you want to ask something about that.
Yes,
or
we
if you
have some questions here. I think you already answered a few of them. One said that probably a great number of people already experience without knowing what it is. I think that's true. And I imagine you can confirm near that experience, people, they put a frame according to the experiences that they have. and they are going to kind of interpret the phenomenon according to their beliefs. So that comes to another question, which is from Rui Bueno. He is asking, let's see here, in what sense intellectuality can help us experiencing the phenomenon of consciousness?
Well, let me begin trying to answer the question.
Do you think it might help? And then we have another question that also poses the emotional approach. If this would cause any experience the phenomenon or not. So we have two variables, one with the intellectuality and another one the emotions.
Okay, Anna, let me go one by one. Okay, let me try to answer each question. I'll try to begin answering the question Hui made about the intellectuality. In general, intellectuality doesn't help because intellectuality, in general, fails to show the person what reality is. I mean, in general, intellectuality is full of mistakes because this phenomenon that we call the intellectual skill, we use both perception and the ability of representation of the world, both together. And in general, our representation from the world is not perfect. And that's the problem. But if a person may develop the intellectual skills in a way that the personal representations move closer to reality, so in this way, intellectuality may help develop cosmic consciousness. But to follow this stream requires a great level of cosmoethics in a way that the individual may develop his intellectual skills really to approach reality, and mainly the reality of other consciousnesses. Let me try to explain in a better way. When you are talking with someone and the other people thinks about you and you perceive that what the other people thinks doesn't correspond to your reality, so this other person may not expand the consciousness. But when you feel that another person is really perceiving what is happening to you, so this kind of perception, this kind of intellectual ability to really perceive another person and to think in the right way about other persons. So this kind of intellectuality may move closer to the expansion of consciousness. So in general, when we think about other people, in general, we have mistakes. It's better for us to perceive, much more to perceive other people. When I talk to other people, it's much better to talk about my perceptions and not to use my imagination about other people. So the perception assumes a very important role in all this. So it's very important to re-educate the way we develop our relationships and how do we use our intellect when we refer to other consciousnesses. This kind of re-education is very important. If you have the chance to expose anything that could be classified as a prejudice about other people, you may fail. This kind of intellectual ability may not move towards the expansion of consciousness. And this is very common when people think about phenomenon in a wrong way. So any teeny mistake may put you aside from the way of the expansion of consciousness. So that's why the intellectual way in general is not, it's not very useful. But it's possible to develop the intellectual skills in this way, but it's very hard to do it. It means a very hard exercise, really, to try to develop a kind of perfection in your intellectual skills. So it's possible. In the Hinduism tradition, there is a way to refer to this problem. They call it consciousness without thought. To try to reach the expansion of consciousness without thinking. If you think about things, it's harder, but it's not impossible. Okay? So this is what we have studied so far, and our research is indicating this kind of problem. I developed a hypothesis that I call the convergent intellect, to mean this way to develop the intellectual ability when you try to put together what you perceive and what you think about something. When your perception is not coincident with your representations, this is the conventional intellect. But when your perception fits precisely with your perception, so you may feel the sensation of unity with your perceptions, with the objects you perceive. So the sensation of unity, it seems that it comes from this precise adjustment between perception and representations. Okay? This is a very important point for me, and I'm researching this point. I'm trying to write about it. That's why I wanted to talk about this right here in the beginning of the answers. So Anna, please, there are other questions. Help me to remember the other questions. Can we say that a person with a more emotional approach towards life might have more difficulty in having a cosmic consciousness? Maybe, maybe not. I don't have a clear answer to this question, because besides the emotional approach, consciousness is much bigger than that. Okay? I admit the possibility that it may be possible with a certain kind of emotion. If we can admit a kind of spectral observation through all the emotions, we may see that there are emotions with a level of resonance with our energies that really doesn't help. But maybe a few emotions, and maybe we may not call them emotions, but maybe they can be called high-level sentiments, high-level feelings that may help us to develop high-level energies, high level of resonance. So I don't know. I really don't know if consciential phenomenon that can trigger, that can help high level of energetic resonance, of new experiences, they may help to expand consciousness. Okay? In the same way that a few minutes ago I talked about the problems of intellect, other manifestations of consciousness also, they may have a kind of gradient, a kind of variation that can move closer to consciousness reality. Emotion the emotions may also have the same kind of evolutionary process, you see? So any kind of consensual attribute may evolve towards the expansion of consciousness. This could be a general theory of everything that happens with consciousness. So I would not exclude any kind of consensual attribute from this path. You understand? But we may study the perspective of evolution of the attributes in general for us to understand this way. Okay? Let's see other topic, other question.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ulysses. We might continue with the slides.
Let's go. So we're talking about definition. This definition we can talk all day about this definition. But let's see here. Those are the next slide, please. The next. Okay. Those are words or expressions that I use as synonymous to cosmic consciousness. You may find more than that. I wrote down those expressions from the book Projectology. You may find much more than those expressions there in the book. Here are just a few. You may find here the expressions from Buddhism, from Islamism. You see, in many different traditions, you may find closer expressions to this. You may see here Samadhi, okay, Nirvana, universal mind. There is an important expression. It is called universal consciousness. Universal consciousness. It is the expression that could produce the neologism cosmic consciousness. So you may ask, who created this expression, cosmic consciousness? Who created? When and where this kind of knowledge rises in humankind? You see? So there was a man, his name is Edward Carpenter. He was an English philosopher and also sociologist, and he had the experience of expansion of consciousness. And he traveled. He went for a long trip, more than once, to the eastern part of the world, to India. And he wrote many books. And he got in contact with Hinduism in the core of the tradition. And he wrote a book. It is called From Adam's Peak to Elephanta. This is the title of his book. And he proposes the name cosmic consciousness to refer to this experience of expansion of consciousness. And Carpenter, Edward Carpenter, he was a very close friend from Richard Book, the Canadian. Really, he was born in England, but he moved to Canada. Richard Book was a psychiatrist, and when he was 36 years old, he had the experience of a great expansion of consciousness, and he published the main book on the subject. And Carpenter gave to Book this expression. They were friends, so Richard Book published the expression. Many people think that Richard Book was the creator of the expression, but he took it from his friend Edward Carpenter. Okay, so this is the origin of this expression. And that's very interesting. And Professor Waldo, he just put the words in another combination, and he proposes cosmic consciousness. It is the same as cosmic consciousness. And Professor Waldo, he considers Richard Book a high-level researcher, the main researcher in this field of cosmic consciousness. So let me go ahead here. Any other question, Anna, please? Let me tell you something about this interesting classification on the phenomenon of expansion of consciousness. So we are trying to help to understand how a person can approach the experience. So trying to understand that this experience may grow from the beginning, from little expansions until the expansions from the higher level. So we are proposing a classification in 3 levels: the partial expansion of consciousness, the integral expansion of consciousness, and the maximal expansion of consciousness. So, and also a generic definition about what is expansion of consciousness. Okay, so let's see. So in conscientiology, the phenomenon of an expansion of consciousness consists of the amplification of the operating of certain consciential attributes to varying degrees, whether partially or entirely, temporally or permanently. That means, for instance, if you are hearing something, if you apply your attention to the sound you hear, and if you go deeper in this perception, you may expand your consciousness very little, but in a certain level. It's the beginning. So everything that happens through using this conception that we are presenting right now to expansion of consciousness, if you can apply your consciousness, your perception to any phenomenon in your field, you may expand your consciousness in a certain level, even if it's too little. Okay? So this is a very general conception of expansion of consciousness, for you to give value to the things you perceive, to everything that you apply your attention. Everything is important, from the lower levels until the highest. So it's very important to consider that you may expand your consciousness, beginning from very simple experiences. And if you dedicate yourself to understand and to observe yourself, so you may evolve in this way. But there are problems in this kind of process. Let's see here in the second paragraph. This can be detected due to the consequent amplification of the consciousness perceived potentialities, resulting in the enhancement of a specific manifestation and in the very essential meaning of being consciousness. So, what we mean here, if you are perceiving what it really is, if you are not applying your imagination, if you are able to exclude other phenomena and dedicate yourself to your perception, and if you put together ethics, your cosmoethics in your life, in your perception, probably you will come closer to initial meanings of your consciousness. That's what we are referring here. We are meaning with the very existential meaning of being consciousness. And perception has this power to consciousness. When consciousness perceives the value of perception, in general, a person will discover the great value of being a consciousness. Okay? This is a kind of sensation for us to admire life, for us to contemplate everything, our consciousness, everything that is alive, okay? If you try to re-educate yourself in this way, so you may be prepared to other levels in terms of perception. So let's see right now. The partial expansion of consciousness can be characterized starting from the minimal amplification of one or more consensual attributes in varying degrees, temporally or permanently. So now we are talking about only a part of your consciousness, a few attributes, or only one attribute. After that, the amplifying effect of the cosmic perception proper to the initial stages of the cosmic consciousness may or not occur. Here I mean that if you have a partial perception, but this perception is not integrated in the wholeness of your consciousness, you may not feel what we call cosmic sense. You may only have a kind of perception with a common effect not expanded, okay? For instance, written here in the second paragraph, this category represents a common manifestation between people when one exerts one or more attributes in a way above the normal, but still it is possible to occur significant deviations in relation to the reality and to moral values. It means that it's possible for you to expand a little bit one kind of perception, but even though you may follow in a not ethic way, you see? So little expansions, they are possible to any kind of person, even person with a really very bad level in terms of ethics, okay? But in the next level in our classification, we call it the integral expansion of consciousness. This can be characterized starting from the minimal expansion of a set of consensual attributes in varying degrees, temporally or permanently, generating an integrated or significant effect of amplification of cosmic paraperception proper to the intermediate stages before cosmic consciousness. Well, we're trying to say here that this kind of phenomenon is that one we used to call a real expansion of consciousness. When the perception is able to mobilize your consciousness as a whole, integrating cosmoethics, perception, and a significant group of attributes. This kind of expansion, the expansive integral effect may occur from lower levels until higher levels. It's not common. This kind of expansion is not common. It requires higher levels of consensual energy, evolution of moral quality, and cosmophysiological sense of reality. So even in the lower levels of an integral expansion, it's necessary to reach higher levels in terms of consensual energy, an evolution of your moral quality, and a kind of cosmophysiological sense of reality, even in lower level. But when you put those parameters together, so you may find yourself in a classical experience of expansion of consciousness, even in lower level, okay? And after that, if you educate yourself, if you go deeper in your perception, so you may move forward until a maximal expansion. So this is a possible category to be taken as a feasible objective in a shorter period. So you may develop this skill. This is possible to anyone to develop this, since you find a cosmoethical way of life. Without cosmoethics, we think that it's not possible to develop integral expansion of consciousness. So here, cosmoethics is necessary in this level of classification. Okay? I will move forward because I know that we are close to the end of our time here. Let me tell you just a few words about this. So the maximum expansion of consciousness can be characterized by the maximal magnification of a set of consensual attributes temporally or permanently. Permanently here considering, for instance, the free consciousness, the consciousness that no more comes to the intraphysical dimension, okay? So generating a significant effect of amplifying the cosmic paraperception, constituting the attainment of the cosmic consciousness phenomenon. So the cosmic consciousness, we consider it a maximal expansion of an integral expansion. This is a theoretical approach that we use it to try to show that it's possible for anyone to reach cosmic consciousness, we say, through the intermediate, the gradual expansion of consciousness. Let me see here what we have before we finish. Here is just a slide showing what we call the Western generation core of the knowledge we are applying today. Edward Carpenter, Richard Book, and Walt Whitman. Those three men, they worked together to help people to get in contact, mainly in the Western and also after that in the whole world, trying to write about this phenomenon. And after them, a group of people helped to disseminate the knowledge about this phenomenon. William James, just a few years after Richard Book was dead, he wrote about Book's experience. He wrote about that in his classical, The Varieties of Religious Experience. And the same did Evelyn Underhill in his book about mysticism. And the same, Piotr Uspensky, Aldous Huxley, and those people, they commented about Richard Book experience. Mainly, Piotr Uspensky, he developed a very hard critique about Book's work. Okay, it's very important if you can read the chapter number 23 of this book, Tertium Organum. Uspensky, he develops a very interesting critique to Book. It's a very technical critique. It's very interesting. We have references from Professor Valdo in many books. Projections of Consciousness. He first published it in 1981. The chapter number 60 is about, he describes an experience of cosmic consciousness. And he has a special chapter in the book Projectology. He has a special chapter also in the book 700 Experiments of Conscientiology. He wrote a verbit in Portuguese about it. Let me tell you, I wrote a chapter in this book, Cosmic Consciousness and Human Excellence. It was published in Cambridge Scholars. It was edited by my friends Mahmoud Masaeli and Rico Sneller. I call this history about Richard Book, and I present a few hypotheses in conscientiology in this chapter. And this idea about the gradual development of the expansions of consciousness, I published about this topic in this book, Spirituality and Global Ethics, in 2017. And after that, I also developed a kind of differentiation. What is cosmic consciousness and what is faith? Right? I developed a study of faith to show what is faith, what is not faith. But there is a special approach concerning cosmic consciousness in this chapter. It was published in Belgium, not in Cambridge. It's wrong here what I wrote. It was not in Cambridge. It was in Belgium, a house publishing in Belgium. And more recently, last year, I published this dictionary with a lot of paraphysiological processes that helps too much for one to find the basis to develop the expansions of consciousness, mainly the paracognitive abilities, when you really try to develop details in the mental somatic processes. So I'd like to ask you a few excuses because our time, there is a lot of subject. I prefer to stop hereby and to tell you that in the next speech here, my colleague, my friend, Rodrigo Marchioli, will continue this subject, okay? I tried here to develop a phenomenological approach, and Rodrigo, who works together with me, and who will present a few evolutionary approaches on this phenomenon. Okay, Anna? But do you have something more right now?
Professor Ulisses. On December 4th, we are going to have also give course of cosmic consciousness along with Professor Ulisses. And since this is a very complex subject, we are going to continue to develop this topic in December 4th. And I'd like to thank you again for joining us today. If you have any more, the through YouTube or Facebook. Anyways, subscribe to our social media and to our for your time here, Professor Ulisses.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
Any final words, any final remarks?
Thank you, Anna. We hope that we may present a course, an extended course, even using YouTube. We want to publish this subject worldwide in a way that people may have access. Right now, the subjects we are developing, we know that they are very advanced right now in our planet.
Perfect.
We could put together a lot of references, and we are really trying to develop a global dialogue on the subject. And also, in our course, we also try to develop a kind of laboratory where people may experience the expansion of consciousness with some orientation, okay? So I'd like to invite you to if you have information of this course, pay attention and you're invited to participate. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm very glad to be in contact with you and to receive also your contacts, okay? You may find my references on those publications, also my email. It's ulysses.schlosser, gmail.com. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and have a very good day and a happy evolutionary journey. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much.